Okay, so I want to ask you something before we get into anything else today. And I want you to answer it honestly, even if the answer is a little bit uncomfortable. When is the last time that you went on a date and just showed up? Not prepared, not strategized, not with a mental checklist running in the background. Just actually showed up, curious, no agenda, genuinely open to whoever was sitting across from you. I'm asking because I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and because I recently came across some intriguing data that made me go, okay, we should talk about this. So I was going through a bunch of 2026 singles data and data, whatever, I might flip it. The kind of stuff that gets published every year about dating trends and app behavior. And friend, 53% of singles have quit swiping altogether. More than half, just done. And when the researchers dug into why, what they found wasn't that people gave up on love or that they decided to be single forever. What they found was something more specific and a little more telling, though not at all surprising. People are exhausted from the process. We know this. 78% of dating app users report burnout, and only 12% say that they're satisfied with their experience on apps. 12. I'm one of the 12, apparently. And then there's this other piece of research that I genuinely cannot stop thinking about, which again is not so much surprising, but it is jarring. So a survey of over 2,000 dating app users found that 1 in 3 people now use dating apps for professional networking purposes, as in career advancement. 33% of people on Tinder and Bumble are there, at least in part, to make business connections, which tells you something really important about what dating apps have become in the mind of the high-achieving person. The line between professional and personal has gotten so blurred that people are literally using the same platform for both. Welcome back to Stripped, Drop Your Patterns. I'm Rachel J, and I am so glad that you're here for this one. Whether you're new to the show or you've been walking your dog to the sound of my voice for a while now, thank you. Today's episode is a direct follow-up to our last one, where we talked about how the skills that built your career are quietly working against you in dating. So if you haven't listened to that one yet, I really encourage you to go back and start there, because what we're getting into today builds on that, and I think the two together are going to land in a way that neither one does just on its own. All right, let's get into it. Throw out the rules, forget the cliches. This isn't about the perfect profile or the perfect date. It's about real connection. It's time to strip away the masks, shed the stories, and drop those old patterns that no longer serve you. Tired of dating advice that doesn't fit? So are we. Welcome to Stripped, Drop Your Patterns, where conscious dating isn't about following a script. It's about embracing your whole self and attracting the kind of love that sets your soul on fire. I'm Rachel J, the connection coach and your host. Let's get real. So last week, we talked about 6 specific patterns that high achievers tend to carry from the boardroom into the bedroom. Emotional compartmentalization, the problem-solving reflex, persona management, outcome orientation, the way rejection gets processed, and status signaling. 6 ways that a completely brilliant and functional operating system in one context can create friction, distance, and confusion in another. What I want to talk about today is what happens when you take all 6 of those things and the broader culture of high-performance optimization around them, and you combine them with the specific anxiety of modern dating. Because something is happening out there right now that is worth naming clearly. There's a pattern so widespread that it's literally showing up in the data, and it has a very specific feel to it. It's clinical, efficient, controlled, detached, like a really well-run due diligence process. I'm talking about what happens when dating becomes a business plan. And I want to be clear here before we go further. I am not here to shame this. I'm not here to make you feel like anything's wrong with you for thinking this way, because there isn't. There's actually a very understandable reason that this happens, and it is not a character flaw. It's a protective strategy, and it makes complete sense when you understand where it comes from. That said, it's not working. And part of the reason it's not working is that most people who are doing it don't even realize they're doing it. We live in a culture that rewards efficiency and saving time because time is money, right? These people think that they're just being smart and efficient and intentional in a way. They don't realize that they've replaced the experience of meeting someone with a strategic vetting system. I want to tell you about a client that I'm going to call Marcus. Marcus is in his mid-30s, works in tech. He's genuinely one of the most intelligent and self-aware people that I've worked with. And he came to me because he'd been dating actively for several years and he kept hitting the same wall. He'd match with someone, have great initial conversations, go on a date that felt like it went well, and then nothing. Fade out. The connection never materialized into anything real, and he couldn't figure out why. Well, before a first date, Marcus would do what he called research. LinkedIn, Instagram, sometimes a quick Google, to make sure that the person was who they said they were. That's understandable, right? And for anyone who thinks that women are the only ones who investigate matches before a date, there you have it. Everyone is doing their diligence now, and to an extent, it's a reflection of the world that we live in and needing to protect ourselves from catfishing. It's a very real thing. But the part that got me was that Marcus was also doing this to assess whether his matches were worth his time before he invested in them. First dates, he told me, he keeps under 45 minutes whenever possible. He said, I don't want to overinvest if it's not going anywhere. Okay. But afterward, he'd rate the date in his head using a rough scale, and if the person made it to a second date, then he'd start to actively track whether she demonstrated the quote-unquote key attributes that he was looking for. So he had a list of core requirements, nice-to-haves, and deal breakers, and it was very organized. And it's not that I'm opposed to creating a list. In fact, it's one of the exercises that I guide my clients through in personal coaching and within the self-paced app. But here's the thing. The list that Marcus created was based on a framework of superficial metrics that were not based on character, values, or life goals. It was based on factors that he had been conditioned to value as yet another external marker of achievement, which is a very different kind of list. And Marcus was proud of his list because from where he was standing, this was just smart dating, efficient. It was respectful of his own time and from his perspective of his date's time. So I asked him one question. I said, Marcus, when you're actually on a date, sitting across from someone, conversation is going, where is your attention? What are you actually thinking about? He paused for a long time. And then he said, well, whether she's making the cut, I guess. And I thought, okay, there it is. He was not thinking, what is this person actually like? Not, am I genuinely enjoying this conversation? Or is there something vibing between us that I want to explore? The question running in the background the whole time was whether she was passing the evaluation, whether she would get the callback, to use language from my theater background, or make the second round of interviews, to use language from your background. Now, here's what I want you to notice about that dynamic because it's subtle and it's important. Marcus wasn't trying to be cold or aloof or detached. He genuinely wanted to find a partner. But the system that he'd built to protect himself from wasting time was doing something he hadn't accounted for. It was also protecting him from actually connecting, because you cannot be in evaluation mode and in genuine presence at the same time. Those two states are mutually exclusive, and the person sitting across from you can feel the difference even if they can't name it. So this is what I mean when I say dating has become a business plan. It's not just that the language has shifted, though it has, and we're going to come back to that in a minute. It's that the entire internal orientation to meeting people has become transactional. Assess, evaluate, filter, decide, optimize the process, minimize the downside, protect the ROI, which works beautifully in venture capital, and it's quietly suffocating everything romantic. Here's the thing about the vetting economy. Okay, it's dressed up in the language of being discerning and having standards and not wasting time, all of which sound completely reasonable. Who could argue with that? Of course you should have standards. Of course your time is valuable. I'm not disagreeing with either of those. But underneath the logic of it, if you look honestly at what's actually driving the behavior, what you'll almost always find is fear. And it's not a conscious fear usually, not the kind that you'd be able to name in the moment. It's more like a low-grade ambient fear that has been running so quietly and for so long that it just feels like common sense now. I'm talking about the fear of being vulnerable with someone who might not choose you back, the fear of getting attached and then being disappointed, the fear of investing real emotional energy in something that doesn't pan out, which at some point stopped feeling like a minor inconvenience and started feeling like a verdict on your worth. And so the brain, your very smart, very efficient, very pattern-loving brain, came up with a solution. It said, what if I controlled for that? What if I just assessed more carefully up front, vetted more thoroughly, built a system that filtered out the bad investments before I had to actually catch feelings? And your brain did this because it was trying to help you. And I genuinely want you to hear that. This is not a sign that you're closed off or emotionally unavailable or incapable of love. It's just a sign that at some point in your life you got hurt or rejected or disappointed enough times that some part of you decided the pain wasn't worth the risk, and then quietly started building structures to minimize that risk. Structures that look from the outside like efficiency, but function underneath as armor. In my work as a cuddlist, I have sat with hundreds of men in the actual presence of their own emotional experience, not their thoughts about it, not their analysis of it, but the thing itself. And what I have witnessed over and over again is that the more controlled and systematic a man has become in his approach to connection, the more tender the thing that's actually underneath it that's being protected. The spreadsheet is not who he is. The spreadsheet is what he built to protect himself and to not have to feel how much he actually wants a rich, loving partnership. So when I say the vetting economy isn't working, I'm not saying it because the approach is strategically flawed, though it is. I'm saying it because it's fundamentally lonely, and some part of you already knows that. Now, let's talk about what it looks like in practice, because I want to get specific. The LinkedIn audit before the first hello is a real thing. Researching someone before a first date is so common now that it's practically expected. And again, a basic safety check makes sense. But there's a difference between a safety check and a background investigation. When you're reading through someone's professional history, assessing their career trajectory, mentally calculating whether their life looks like a compatible match before you've even had a single real conversation with them, that's not dating. That's due diligence. And you can't do due diligence on a person and simultaneously be present with them. Those two orientations are at war with one another. The 45-minute date rule is another one. And I understand the logic, I do. It feels like a reasonable containment strategy because, hey, if the chemistry isn't there in 45 minutes, you cut the loss and move on. But what it actually communicates at an energetic level is that you came in with an exit already planned. You were already checked out. You were never fully there, but instead counting down the clock while tallying a performance score. And people feel that. It makes the whole thing feel performative, like an interview, like we talked about last week, rather than an encounter. And again, interviews don't generate chemistry or second dates. And then there's the language shift, which I think is the most telling sign of all. When you find yourself calculating whether the time you spent on a date was worth it in the same terms you'd use to evaluate a business meeting, like ROI or time investment, marginal returns, whether she moves the needle, something important has happened. You've translated a fundamentally human experience into a completely dehumanizing frame. And even if you'd never say any of that out loud to a date, it's operating in the background. It's shaping your energy. It shows up in your eyes. It is felt, and it is a turnoff. Here's a little piece of data that I think pulls this all into focus. Okay, according to Tinder's most recent year-in swipe report, and I know we're going on Tinder data, but stay with me. The number one dating priority for singles right now, above looks, above career, above all of it, is emotional honesty. The thing that people are most hungry for in a potential partner is the experience of someone who is actually emotionally present and real with them. Not impressive, present. We are living in a moment where the thing that you are most afraid to offer, genuine, unguarded, unstrategized presence, is truly the most magnetic thing that you could possibly show up with. Just let that land for a second. And I want to step outside of the coaching frame for just a second because I think this part matters and I want to say it as a fellow human. We're all navigating a level of uncertainty right now that is genuinely unprecedented, politically, economically, socially. And I don't know about you, but I feel it in my body, in my conversations, in the way I move through the world some days. And when the world feels unstable, the instinct to control what you can, to assess and filter and minimize risk wherever possible, it doesn't just show up in how you watch the news or manage your money or shield yourself on public transportation or sidewalks. It shows up in how you walk into a first date. And I understand that impulse completely because I'm living in the same world you are. And it wasn't that long ago that I was on the other side of those dates. But here's what I keep coming back to, and this is me talking, not the coach. The more unsettled things feel out there, the more hungry people become for something real. Not impressive, not curated, not optimized. Real. Human. Present. The vetting economy is a symptom of a world where everyone is scared and quietly armoring up. And the person who's willing to show up without the armor right now, well, that is rare. And guess what? Rare is magnetic. Hey, quick break. I want to tell you about something I created specifically for what we've been talking about in this episode. It's called 5 Minutes to Magnetism, and it's a free one-page ritual that you can do anywhere. Before you leave the house, in your car, on the train, standing outside the restaurant, in just 5 minutes before a date. It's designed to do one thing: get you out of performance mode and into genuine presence before you even walk through that door. Because here's what I know from years of working with men one-on-one. The shift doesn't happen on the date. It happens before it. And 5 intentional minutes is genuinely all the difference between showing up as the polished version of yourself and showing up as the actual one. It's free, it takes 5 minutes, and it works. Grab it at the link in the show notes. Okay, back to the episode. So what do you do with this? Well, first, I want to be clear that I'm not suggesting that you abandon discernment or walk into dates with zero awareness of what you're looking for. Having a sense of your values, what genuinely matters to you in a partner, what you're looking for in a relationship, that's not the problem. That's actually healthy, and it's part of the work that I do with clients both privately and within Magnetic. Knowing what you want is very different from running an ongoing efficiency audit on every person that you meet. The distinction that I want to offer you is this. There's a meaningful difference between bringing your whole self to a date and using a date to evaluate whether someone else is worth your whole self. One of those is connection, the other is assessment. And only one of them creates the conditions for something real to grow. The shift that I've watched change everything for clients like Marcus isn't a tactical change. It's not be more vulnerable as a strategy, which, let's be honest, would just become another performance if it hasn't been integrated. It's a genuine internal reorientation toward curiosity over assessment, toward presence over process, toward what is actually interesting about this person right now, rather than, is this going anywhere? And here's the neuroplasticity piece, because you know I find brain talk sexy, and because I know some of you need this to land in your body as a real thing. The evaluation loop is a neural pattern. It's a groove in your brain that has been reinforced through repetition over years, maybe decades, of approaching high-stakes interactions in performance mode. And just like the patterns we talked about last week, it doesn't change through insight alone. It changes through the repetition of a different choice made consistently over time. You literally lay down new wiring every time you catch the assessment brain coming online and choose instead to just get genuinely curious about the person in front of you. And I assure you, it's not a personality transplant. It is a practice. And it's a practice that starts privately at your own pace with nothing more than patience and consistency. Let me invite you into something for just a moment. And if you're driving, keep your eyes on the road and just let this be audio. I want you to think about your last first date, or if it's been a while, the most recent date or relationship that really mattered to you. Bring it into your mind as vividly as you can. Now ask yourself honestly, when you were there, actually sitting across from that person, what percentage of your attention was on them, on what they were saying, on what was happening between you, on what was genuinely interesting or compelling or alive in the room? And what percentage of your attention was on you, on how you were coming across, on whether it was going well, on whether they were making the cut? And you don't have to answer out loud. Just notice without judgment. Just be honest with yourself about where you actually were. Because that noticing, that honest moment of seeing where your attention has been trained to go, is where the work begins. Not in some big dramatic shift, but in the quiet recognition and active decision to do it differently next time. And what differently looks like, practically and concretely, is what I want to give you right now. I have a free resource that I created specifically for this, and I want you to have it. It's called 5 Minutes to Magnetism, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a 5-minute mindset ritual to do before a date that gets you out of assessment brain and into genuine presence. Not as a performance of presence, as the actual thing. And I designed it because I kept watching clients arrive at dates fully prepared, fully polished, fully on, and yet completely unavailable. And the problem wasn't their preparation. It was that they'd prepared for everything except the one thing that actually determines whether a date generates chemistry, which is being genuinely there. The 5-minute magnetism guide is quick, it's real, it works, and it's free. The link is in the show notes. And if you've been listening to this episode and feeling that low hum of recognition, if any part of this landed and made you think, okay, something maybe needs to shift here, this is the place to start. Just 5 minutes before your next date. That's all I'm asking. And if you want to go deeper, if you're at the point where you're not just ready to have better dates, but ready to actually rewire the underlying patterns that have been running this whole show, that is what Magnetic is for. It's my 6-week self-guided program built around exactly this work, not tips and tactics, a genuine inside-out rewire. The waitlist is open, and that link is in the show notes too. One last thing before I go. I invite you to please share this episode with a colleague, a friend, a brother who you've watched treat his love life like a performance review and wondered when he was going to catch a break. This conversation changes things when more people are having it. Until next time, I'm Rachel J, and this is Strip Drop Your Patterns. Bye for now.